Welcome to Anything is Possible, the Boston Celtics podcast here on the Athletic Podcast Network. I'm your host, Sam Jam Packard, professional sports fan, and I am joined, as always, by the kid, the god, the legend himself, Celtics beat reporter from theathletic.com. And he's coming live from the car in the Cape because it wouldn't be a Brad Stevens offseason without some more breaking news. Brad moves quickly. He trades Kemba Walker before anyone knew you could make trades, and he immediately signs the new head coach of the Boston Celtics, Ime Udoka, assistant from the Brooklyn Nets. He was also assistant with the Philadelphia 76ers for a year and then had 7 years coaching experience in the Greg Popovich system. Jay, what is your main reaction to the signing of Ime Udoka?
From everything people say about him, he's sort of like a badass Brad. He has a lot of the same values when it comes to basketball, a lot of the same values when it comes to relationship building, a lot of the same values with, team building and everything like that. And he's also a guy with NBA playing experience, known as a tough competitor throughout his time in the league, and has that super competitive side, just like Brad did, but it wasn't always shown publicly. But yeah, I think he's been building for this moment kind of for a long time. And if you look at the places he's been, first it was Greg Popovich. Obviously, that's a great dude to learn under for a number of years. And then this last year too, he took the Nets defense, which really had not much talent at all. And I thought by the time the playoffs were started, like, that team was a physical defense. That team really, really played hard and connected on the defensive end and probably played above its level defensively. So I think there's some evidence there that he's probably, very, very good defensive tactician at least.
It's not surprising to me that Brad would hire kind of a defensive-focused coach, just because that's what Brad is kind of known for when he was a coach, and it feels like that's the key to really being a solid team. And that seems to be what Brad values on the defensive end, and that's really what was so surprising about this year is how much the defense slipped. And so I think it's good that they're kind of going to return to the fundamentals and get a more defensive-minded guy in there, just because I think that's like how you win championships and that's how you're consistent. That's how I think Brad was able to kind of coach less talented teams to overperform, is that he always had a defense that was in the top 5 or 10 in the league. And I think that's just like what Brad Stevens values as a good basketball team. The other thing I think is important about this hire is that the Celtics top players, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Marcus Smart, and I think it's interesting that Marcus Smart was included in there as well, but they all signed off on this hiring and they all have experience playing for Udoka because he was part of the staff for that 2019 World Championship team, Team USA, and all three of those guys vouched for him, and it seems like from the reporting that was the guy that those guys wanted. And I don't know, this is a players' league. Your job as an NBA coach is to get your superstars happy and get them playing at the best of their abilities. And I feel like going out and hiring their guy or the guy that they wanted is just a good sign for changing might have been bad vibes from last season, kind of changing them and making it positive moving forward.
Yeah, I think the bad vibes were primarily because they were 500. Nobody's
of the losing,
the losing was and for the last 8 years that Brad was there, the Celtics had a good coach, and some years I think he was a great coach, a couple years not as great. But I do think it's important that Tatum and Brown and Smart are on board, and I do think the Celtics really valued those guys' opinion throughout this process and wanted to find someone who could connect with them, because let's face it, a huge part of Ime Udoka's job will be to build relationships with those guys, make sure that those guys respect him, and bring them to another level, both as individual players and as lifting their teammates up, which I think is the biggest factor for the Celtics moving forward is that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have to be the type of guys who lift up everyone around them and do it on a consistent basis. And the Celtics, they need to revamp the rest of the roster. They don't have tons of flexibility to do that, obviously. But this is a quick and decisive start from Brad Stevens' first few weeks as president of basketball operations. He moved quickly on Kemba, moved quickly on Ime, and I think this has a chance to be a pretty good hire. I think Udoka has a chance to be a pretty good coach.
And I think being young and being a former player is just important. And if we see it currently with the final 4 teams remaining in the playoffs, 3 out of the 4 coaches, relatively young former players who it seems like everyone else respects and everyone on the team respects. And then the last guy is Coach Bud, who no one respects, and his coaching is highly questionable. So I think it was important to get someone in there who I like, who's young. I thought it was interesting that Udoka had a chance to kind of continue his playing career, maybe go overseas. Because you look at his basketball reference page, him as a player, really not that impressive. But he could have continued playing in Europe, but he said, no, I want to get into coaching, and decided to go to the best place, the best organization, and start doing that at an early age. And he's still a young guy. And so I just think it's we've seen that just work around the league, where you have relatively younger coaches, black coaches who are able to connect with younger black players. I just think that's an important thing and something the Celtics clearly were trying to do. And so I just think when we see what's been successful this year, it's not surprising that the Celtics have kind of followed that model.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it necessarily takes a black man to connect with black players. I think it's
I don't think it's a necessary condition, but I think it's easier.
I'm sure in some ways, but it definitely was important to the Celtics to hire a person of color. For a long time now, their front office, especially the guys at the top of that front office, it's been very white, and I don't know whether that matters to players, but I do think it matters to the Celtics to get some more diversity in the building, to start bringing in different types of voices and different types of people. And so that definitely played a factor into the types of candidates that they were looking at. And then I think finding a former player, and Udoka's case, he went through a lot as a player. He really had to grind his way into the NBA. He really had to grind his way to stay there. And I think that those experiences, and then seeing guys like Tim Duncan, seeing guys like Manu Ginobili, seeing guys like Tony Parker, just how they approach the game, and all those experiences matter. All those experiences shape a coach. And when you look at the guys he played with, the guys he coached, the guys that he coached under, there are just a lot of great minds that have kind of impacted him throughout the years.
And he was on the staff during that 2014 Spurs team, which is I think Brad Stevens will wax poetic about it whenever he can, about the greatest offense ever. I don't know that was only his second year as an assistant coach. I don't know how much of an impact he actually had on that team, but it's just a great place to learn and be into that environment. And just take whatever lessons you get from Coach Popovich. I think his Team USA experience is good. I mean, he has FaceTime with all of these stars and all of these players, and I don't know if that's necessarily going to lend itself this immediate offseason, but I just think it's good that he's clearly was well respected around the league with all the organizations and players, where it's that's the type of person where if you do want to recruit a third star, having him at the helm will be extremely helpful moving forward.
Yeah, it could be. That could be the case, but I don't want to give him that much credit yet before he coaches a single game. I don't want to say just because he was on Team USA, that's a guy that everyone's going to want to go play for. Let's see how he develops as a head coach. I think, obviously this was one of the most intriguing jobs out there, and the Celtics targeted him. They wanted him. And I think it shows a lot that in a year with a lot of coaching vacancies, the Celtics, like, they moved first and they got Udoka, and he was the guy that they wanted. So we'll see how he does, but they obviously seem pretty confident that Udoka has what it takes to be, a pretty good coach.
I know this news broke probably like a half hour ago, so you might not have the answers, but you'll definitely be more informed than I am. What does this mean for the rest of the coaching staff? Do you think it's likely that Udoka is going to bring in kind of his guys and it'll be up to him to kind of fill out the rest of the coaching staff, or do you know where that stands moving forward?
I'm really not sure. When I have talked to assistant coaches over the past couple of weeks, they just kind of seemed in limbo. They're not sure what will come next. When Brad took over, he did keep some of Doc Rivers' assistant coaches, and I know that there are a number of assistant coaches that the Celtics really value, and obviously Udoka will have some power to at least to shape his own staff, maybe all the power to shape his own staff, but I'm sure some of those guys that are already on staff will be considered for positions, and maybe some of them will stay. It's an interesting situation because when Doc left, he took over a different job and took some assistants with him, and some others Brad kept. Whereas this time, like, Brad just went to the GM. Like, he didn't go anywhere to take his coaches with him. So we'll see how many stay on staff. I'm sure part of that will be up to Ime and who he connects with on the staff, and who else he wants to bring in. I think it'll probably be pretty important, considering that he's in his first year, to get an top assistant with a lot of experience. When Brad took over, he got Ron Adams, one of the super highly respected assistants who had been around the league forever, who had, just a ton of experience. And so I think it'll be important to have somebody like that on staff. And obviously, whenever he wants, he'll have Brad upstairs to bounce ideas off of and everything like that.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Jay Larranaga. He obviously was very close to, I think, getting the Hornets job a couple years ago, and maybe he will be interviewed. Like, although I haven't heard his name as much in kind of all these this coaching cycle, but he's someone who has kind of more connection with the roster, and he has the potential to be a head coach. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. What do you think about the fact that Marcus Smart was consulted? Am I reading way too much into the tea leaves that, like, that's indicative of him getting an extension or being, like, with the team long term?
Probably that would be premature. But obviously they do value Marcus Smart. They've considered him one of their core pieces for at least the last few years, and probably since the time they drafted him. So, yeah, obviously he's one of the guys for them, and as the roster is shaped right now, like, it would go, Jalen 1, Jason 2, and probably Smart 3. So yeah, they value him.
I mean, I don't know how this works with this whole reporting thing, but it's been reported that they consulted with 3 guys. I don't know why the Celtics would, like, mention specifically that they talked to Marcus Smart about it if he's not going to be in their future. I feel like Brad Stevens loves Marcus Smart, but maybe I'm just projecting my feelings about Marcus Smart onto Brad Stevens. But Marcus Smart's extension, I think he's extension eligible, so that's a big question. Shout out to the guy with the red bag behind you in the whip, and it looks like a police officer. But I just thought it was interesting that he was mentioned. Jay King better watch out for illegally podcasting right now in his car down on Cape Cod. Anything else from the Ime Udoka signing before we move on to some Celtics nonsense and then get out of here?
Yeah, I think one interesting link beyond the Team USA thing is that he did coach Al Horford in Philadelphia. And
that did not go well.
And so there's that connection too. That did not go well, but it'll be a totally different situation. There won't be Joel Embiid playing center. There won't be Ben Simmons not shooting the basketball. There won't be, there will be a lot of shooting and skill around Al. and he'll be playing center, I assume, most of the time, if not all the time. So Udoka probably knows how to use him, certainly knows how not to use him after the way things went in Philadelphia. But that's another connection that he has. Like, he knows a lot of the Celtics important players pretty well, which I think should help him establish bonds right away. And I'm sure, I don't know if they valued Horford's opinion since they just picked him up, a few days ago. But that he does have relationships with a lot of those guys, and they all respect him.
I like that he was in Philadelphia for that Horford and Embiid season, because he should know that a too big lineup would not work. Because Brad Stevens mentioned the idea in his last press conference of playing Al Horford and Tristan Thompson together. And I think you put it very eloquently in your article writing about that possibility. I think the question was, will these lineups work? And the answer was no, period. It was just very, I thought that was got straight to the point. I don't like the idea of Horford and Thompson playing together. Maybe it's something you do out of necessity of the current roster construction, but that's going to be Udoka's decision right now. And maybe him seeing that Al Horford at power forward was not the greatest. Maybe he'll avoid that move as the Celtics progress next year.
Yeah, and I think there might be sometimes to use that. Like, if you're playing Giannis and the Bucks, then it could be pretty useful to have Al Horford on Giannis while Robert Williams is helping off Brook Lopez and providing that layer of rim protection against Giannis. So I think there are some matchups where that could work, and I think Horford is definitely better suited to play the 4 than Daniel Tice was this past season, because he's more skilled, because he's a better playmaker, because he's a more willing shooter, all of the above. So I don't think it'll work a lot of the time. I think Al Horford is pretty much a center at this stage of his career, but I won't be surprised if there are certain scenarios where they lean on that and it could be helpful.
I think the final question that we have to ask is, does Brad Stevens just value handsomeness? I mean, his first 2 moves were to bring in Al Horford and Ime Udoka, 2 very handsome men. The team just got a lot.
I knew you'd go there.
It's literally my personal brand, but the team got a lot better looking in the first 2 moves. I'm not complaining about it. Also, you have to give Ime Udoka a lot of just credit and respect, because he's dating Nia Long, and she's also quite attractive.
They're not just dating.
Not just dating. It's his wife. So that respect to Ime for his coaching career and his career off the court. Now, before we go, there has been some Celtics nonsense. I didn't tell Jay that we were going to talk about this, but did you see the report that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum don't like each other, and that somehow is going to impact
It was not
the
a
team?
report that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum don't like each other.
What was the report? Set me straight.
It was
here.
a report that they just aren't best friends, but do like each other, which is I think
that seems
known by
obvious.
everyone. Yeah, that was from Jeff Goodman, right? I saw the clip.
I just saw the tweet from WEEI where it's like, these guys hate each other.
No, it's not at all. That wasn't at all what Goodman was saying. He was saying they like each other. They're just not best friends, which I think everybody kind of knew from the beginning. Like, that's not news that they're not like best friends, but they definitely get along from what I know. And certainly I think can be very complementary to each other on the court, especially if they have the right pieces around them. So I don't think there are any issues there.
So did I just play the role of guy trying to make a big story out of nothing? Was I the WEEI in this scenario?
Yeah, you took the WEI tweet to another level. You WEI'd WEI.
I did get my start in this business working for WEEI. The other story, other nonsense that I wanted to say was that Chris Mannix, I actually read this story, reported that the Wizards were very upset with the Celtics for maybe giving them COVID, and said the Celtics flaunted COVID protocols and would routinely go out last year, which is something I think Kevin O'Connor also talked about when Tristan Thompson came after him earlier in the year. I thought that was going to unite the team. It did for about 2 weeks, but it did not. I don't know, any reaction to Mannix reporting that the Wizards were upset with the Celtics for giving them COVID?
I am not going to really. I have no real reaction to that. Like,
I love this game of putting Jay on the spot.
It was a
pandemic.
That situation will never happen again. So I don't think that should really be too concerning moving forward. Would be my reaction to that.
Jay does not dabble in the rumor mill. He does not dabble in salacious stories. He's pure facts, and that's why he is the Celtics beat reporter from The Athletic, and that's why I am the professional sports fan. That's all I have to say about the topic. Jay, is there anything else you want to say? The draft lottery, have any hot takes about the draft lottery or the Eastern and Western Conference Finals?
I will enjoy reading James Edwards' work on Cade Cunningham. I kind of felt like the Raptors deserved to jump to number one. I know you weren't a big Raptors jumping to the top of the lottery guy, but they had to play in Tampa Bay. They had to play away from home for an entire year. They basically all got COVID at the same time. And so they didn't trade Kyle Lowry when they could have. They held on to their franchise star. I just felt like their jump into the top four was kind of basketball gods type stuff to me, if you ask me. And having Fred VanVleet on the roster, Fred VanVleet there, my guy Fred VanVleet, there was no doubt he was going to bring home a top four pick.
I definitely don't think they should have got number one. They're still a very talented team, and it's kind of messed up when a playoff team basically gets the number one pick. They're going to get a very good player. It kind of worked out perfectly for them. I'll agree with you. The basketball gods kind of handed them a real raw deal by making them play in Tampa for the entire year. And so there's no one who deserves to go up or down, but I just didn't like seeing it because the Raptors are good, and I don't like seeing them get better. But from that perspective, yeah, I think they had a horrible year last year, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can just jump back to kind of playoff contention, because they were right there. Game 7 with the Celtics, their roster really didn't change much other than losing Serge Ibaka. If they can add a kind of an impact player, I think they're still going to be, I mean, obviously they don't have the star talent to be in the top team in the East, but I definitely think they're a playoff team next year. I thought that was probably the most interesting part of the draft lottery, other than, nothing else really stood out to me from that other than the Thunder not getting like a crazy amount of picks. Like, I think the Thunder
they beat the Celtics. They should never have beaten the Celtics. That was such a bad decision to beat the Celtics.
It's all Moses Brown's
fault.
It all
came back to kick them in the ass. They would have gotten the number one pick, right? Like, if they had lost one more game, they would have been second in odds, and they would have had the Pistons spot, and they would have had the number one pick. They blew it. The Celtics blew it for the Thunder.
It's going to be wild. Well, basically, they're going to tank again next year, and they have a bunch of first round picks again. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Kemba Walker. But that was kind of wild. You think the Thunder are destined to get a top pick with all their swings at it this year, and now we'll see if they trade up. I don't think it seems like the Pistons are going to draft Cade, and I just don't know the rest of the draft class well enough. But the only other thing I have to say is that Jae Crowder, hell of an inbound pass. I mean,
incredible inbounds pass. That one angle they showed from right behind his shoulder, where you could see how close it was to the backboard. I didn't even know the rule that you could just offensive goaltend on an inbounds pass. Why have teams not utilized this before? I don't understand it.
The Suns did 3 years ago.
The Celtics, every inbounds pass should just throw it right above the rim and just have Robert Williams just fly and get a dunk. Tell me why that shouldn't be in Ime Udoka's playbook. Tell me why that shouldn't be the only play in Ime Udoka's playbook.
I've got no reason for you. If it's not an automatic dunk, it's going to be a foul. Like, if you just have Jason Tatum stand at a sideline out of bounds and basically take a shot, and get it as close to the rim as possible. All Robert Williams has to do is touch it and guide it in. That should be one of the easiest plays in basketball. And so, frankly, I think you're absolutely right. That should be next sideline out of bounds play. What a wild game that was, where the Suns shouldn't have had an opportunity.
Man, those 2 missed free throws. Yikes.
But they shouldn't even have.
Played so well down the
shouldn't have been on the line. That was one of the worst out of bounds calls I've seen ever. With the fact that they reviewed that, clearly the spirit of the law, like the rule, is Pat Beverly knocked that out of his hands, and to review that and be like, oh, Pat Beverly touched it, but it still remained grazed on Devin Booker's hands, and thus to reward the turnover, that was absolutely insane. And that was the biggest ball don't lie free throws ever.
I hate that. I know it's a polarizing take because, like, technically that was off the Suns, but that happens every play, every game. Like, the amount of times you could overturn that and say it's off the other team during the course of a game is just way too many. So I think they should look at that, and there should be some sort of rule that if the ball sticks on your hand for like 0.00001 seconds, then it just doesn't count as
no one watching that live, or you should not be able to review it in slow motion. Like, no one watching that live would have thought, oh, that is Clippers basketball. That's like clearly Pat Beverly got the touch and knocked it out of bounds. Like, that is a basketball play that happens all the time, and every single time, 1,000 times out of 1,000, that should remain with the Suns basketball.
And Pat Bev's his commitment to calling for replays is probably unmatched. The guy would call for a replay no matter the situation. Doesn't even really have to be a close call, although obviously that one was. He'll just call for a replay and demand that the refs hear him out. There were way too many freaking replays in that game.
It might have hurt the Clippers in the end, because that replay with the 0.9 seconds left gave Monty Williams the time to draw up that play. If they just kind of called it, I don't think they had any timeouts left. I don't know if the Jae Crowder throws the most amazing inbound pass in the world just on the fly. He needs some time to kind of cool his jets, get a FaceTime from Chris Paul. Chris Paul will tell him, throw him in the hoop, and his tremendous leadership will kind of propel the Suns forward. Without Pat Bev saying, review it, maybe none of that ever happens.
It takes guts to throw that pass by Jae Crowder. Like, that was such a tough angle to throw that alley-oop. It had to be perfect. It really did. It was an absolute perfect pass. It reminded me of Gerald Wallace. Remember when Gerald Wallace was with the Celtics and just had a string of like awesome inbounds passes, and he was always the guy? And I think Steven said basically, like, we have him as an inbound passer because he has the guts to make those passes, and you got to have the guts. Jae Crowder has them. Jae Crowder, his teams always seem to do more winning than people expect.
That's Jae Crowder. I mean, Gerald Wallace passed it down to Jae Crowder. Jae Crowder threw a ball full length of the court into the hoop again when the Celtics played the Pacers a couple years ago. He clearly has the juice. He clearly impacts winning, and he's been doing it his entire career. So I'm always going to be a Jae Crowder fan, mostly because he granted me an interview one time. The only one-on-one interview I've ever done was with Jae Crowder. So
big moment for Jam the journalist.
That was the peak of my journalistic career. Thank everyone who's been on the YouTube live stream. Thanks everyone for listening on the podcast.
Hold on. We got to talk about your pickup run the other day when you had allegedly 8 straight wins.
Oh, we were glorious. I almost didn't get picked up, and I saw the guy who had next, and I saw one of his 5 go left for some reason. I was like, I know you need a 5th guy. And he's like, are you going to play fucking defense? And I said, that's all I got, baby. And we ran teams off the court. Everyone else, it was not me. I played a great weak side help defense. That's all I did. I started the break, but we had 2 track stars who were just running, and it was pick up in this summertime. People are not running. So if you get 2 guys on your team who are just willing to bust their ass on the fast break every single time, we got so many fast break buckets. That's all I did was deflect the ball and start the break. And it felt good compared to win 8 in a row. Great feeling. Last week, I got kicked in the nuts and had game basically yammed on me. And just the contrast of those 2 feelings was amazing. So if anyone wants to play, starting at 5, Ringer Park in Austin, come out. have me on your team. I will. If I'm the least talented player on the team, that's successful. That's the best. That's the ideal situation for me. I want to be the glue guy who's not relied on to do anything on the offensive end.
There you go, Mr. Glue Guy.
That's what they call me. Actually, no one bothered to learn my name. They just called me Green. So ask around Green. That's the guy you want on your team. All right, Jay, before we go, I just have one question to ask you. Is Nia Long potable?
Yeah, I mean, you potted it better.
Potable! I didn't have one for the end of that one. I had to make it up.